Welcome to Love from Lisha for an extra dose of love in your day. Today, I am here with a special guest, Naieema Jackson of the Determined FemPreneur. I am so excited to have Naieema. Let's give her a big welcome, and I will pass it over to Naieema to tell us a little bit about herself and the Determined FemPreneur.
Yes, thank you, Lisha, so much for having me. As you said, I'm Dr. Naieema, and I am a sales and business strategist to service-based female entrepreneurs who are ready to turn their operations into a multi-six-figure situation while only working 3 to 5 hours a day or less, right? Because ladies, I'm a true believer in you can make an even bigger impact when you're rested. I'm also the host of the Determined FemPreneur Podcast. I'm going to have Lisha as a guest on season 4, so stay tuned. I am a mom. I am a busy entrepreneur. When I say busy, I'm talking about busy and making an impact, not busy and doing work. So this is kind of what we're going to be talking about on how you can still be well and hold yourself accountable as you're on this wellness journey and this entrepreneurship journey, because entrepreneurs, we work too much.
Absolutely. Yes. And we can work ourselves to the bone, and then we're actually compromising what it is that we're working so hard to achieve. Yes. So that wellness is kind of like, if you have a car and you want to make sure that there's maintenance, you want to watch out for that yellow light coming on or, some warning light coming on. So looking at that in entrepreneurs, what is typically most challenging for entrepreneurs when it comes to wellness?
Ooh, I would say really treating our businesses like our babies, right? And when we choose to see it that way, we treat it like our firstborn child. And any woman that's listening now, right, what do we do with our firstborn children? No, we don't want anybody to watch them. We feel like we're the only ones who can do everything, because if someone else does it, they don't do it right. We bring that mentality into our businesses, and we're working 10, 12, 16 hours a day and forsaking all else. But I want to bring in some stats. We're doing all that, yet mental illness is higher in entrepreneurs, anxiety, depression. Female entrepreneurs, only 10% of us ever gross 100K annually in our businesses, ever. Only 2% of us ever gross 7 figures in our businesses ever. And we ultimately don't wind up making the impact that we want to make because most of our businesses fail because we treat it that way, right? And we're overworking ourselves, but you can only sustain that overworking situation for so long.
Yeah. Yes. What do you see being the biggest repercussions of, continuing in that way? What happens 5 years down the road when people, continue at that pace?
Really going back to the health portion, you really compromise your health. And if I can, I want to share a story about myself. When I first started my business, I was overworking myself, working long hours. Like literally I would get up in the morning, shower. Sometimes I wouldn't even eat and go straight into doing work, right? Because you work from home. And I developed something called erosive gastritis. And even if you don't know what that is, just imagine a part of your body eroding, deteriorating. My stomach was doing that because of the constant stress. And that led to burning in my stomach and in my chest for 8 weeks, for 56 days of my life. I couldn't eat. I couldn't really lay down because the acid, it was bad. For what?
Yeah,
it's not sustainable, ladies. Now, you may not have erosive gastritis. No one ever gets it, right? However, the sleepless nights are impacting your health negatively. That snacking all day on unhealthy things because that's all you have time to get is impacting your health. Your lack of self-care is impacting your health. And also we have to understand, if you're like me, you're a mom. Our children are watching us overwork ourselves with little to no reward.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that also brings up an interesting point. So much of it is about how much we're doing and how many hours we're doing it. And there's not so much looking at the being of who are we being as a result. We're being like fatigued because we're waking up in the middle of the night because we're thinking about work and stressing, just like as you mentioned with the baby. You wake up in the middle of the night with the baby, you're doing it with your business
Yep.
baby of like, oh my gosh, should I send that email? Do I need to do that thing? Are people going to show up to my webinar, whatever it is?
Yes.
And so then you're being fatigued, you're being, physically ill. So, maybe it's panic attacks or maybe it's gastrological challenges or, or it could be something else. There's like hair loss and, and there's distraction and, mental fatigue. And so here again, like working so hard, convincing ourselves that this is what it takes is actually a lie, because the reality is that it keeps us from having what we want. It gives us those breadcrumbs, but not the bread. So, yeah, this is a huge challenge. You and I have both experienced the repercussions as a result of like just driving ourselves hard, not allowing ourselves to be passionate, to be present, to be rested. So, looking at, that as the as is versus the should be and how to be, what are some best practices for wellness?
Oh, I would say there's so many best practices. One thing I want to really have us remember is think about the reason why you chose to leave your 9 to 5.
Beautiful.
Keep that at the forefront. Was it time freedom? Was it travel? Was it more time to date? Was it more time for your children? Was it more, whatever it wasn't to overwork yourself.
Yeah.
So if you can in some way keep that why in front of you, I don't care if it's a post-it on your laptop. I don't care if it's a daily reminder on your phone. That is one way to hold yourself accountable. Because for me, time freedom was important. This is one big reason why I left nursing. I needed my time back. And when I started realizing I was overworking myself and I developed the erosive gastritis, I was like, enough is enough. And I started putting a reminder on my phone every day. And it asked me a question. And the question was something like this: is what you're doing today giving you time freedom? And I would make that something that popped up at like 1 p.m. because, I worked half the day now. I'm like, ooh, is it?
Nice.
I'm like, no, I just spent 4 hours on a website and I'm not a web developer anyway. It looks really bad. So those are just two very simple things that you can do. One, remember your big why and have it at the forefront wherever you can keep it so that, hey, this is my big why. Tell somebody else that you love your big why, so that when you start to complain, I don't want to do this, or they start to see you overworking yourself, they may say,
Right.
didn't you tell me you left that job for time freedom?
Yeah. Yes, an accountability partner, that's so important. Yeah. And someone who's like wanting it for you, not because they like telling you what to do.
Oh, yeah.
Like in a loving, compassionate way. And
Yes.
and you brought up a couple of really good points too of, having that visual cue. So sometimes, we keep it in our heads of like, I'm not going to work past this time. And then it's easy to keep rolling over and be like, that's okay, I'll eat lunch at 3 o'clock. And so having that visual reminder, it could be, a post-it note, a reminder on your phone that keeps you. So there's accountability with another person, but then there's also accountability with reminders or cues, or maybe you schedule an exercise class at 1:30 in the afternoon. And so you have to stop to break for that class. It could be, some other commitment.
Yep.
And so having that is important. And another thing that you mentioned is also really good in that if you do go off course, then to look back and be like, okay, what was it that I did that took up that extra time? What ate into my time? What kept me from having that freedom? Rather than beating ourselves up and being like, oh, I messed up again. Oh, I missed, that deadline that I told myself I would commit to. That, just wears us down. So it's looking at curiosity of like, oh, okay, well, this didn't go as intended. So what happened here? What can I redesign? So that curiosity is really key too.
It really is. I feel like beating yourself up in no way helps. The reality is, ladies, society beats us up enough.
Yeah.
Like, leave that to society, right? Just really look objectively at what you're doing in your business. Is this contributing to the overall health and wellness of me and my business? Because we always think about the business, right? And I say this, and this is really controversial, and I understand that. I'm not out here trying to make an impact on other people's lives while mine's deteriorate. So you know what? We don't hear that. We always hear, "Oh, I'm here to make an impact. I want to help. I want to help. I want to help." That's cute.
Yes.
But do you have that same fire, sorry, for yourself and for your health and for your children? And when I say for your children, because let me be real clear, we know you love your kids, but when your kids are constantly see you working, what message are you sending them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. And that brings to mind too, like kind of looking ahead and, thinking, okay, later on in life, in my final days, healthy of mind and body, how do I want to look back at my life? And so you have that vision that you had mentioned, you have your why, you have that freedom. And so then, you kind of have that image in your head or the idea in your head in the present. But it helps too sometimes to like look from the future, from your future self, looking back. How would you like to have described your life? What was important? What wasn't important? You and I, we both share that family and, being a mom, that is so important. So who would we want our kids to say we were? Were we people that, just like worked ourselves to the bone and didn't have time for them because we were working so much and it amounted to relatively little, or that we were really present for them, that they felt that no matter what was happening, they were a priority. They always mattered first and foremost, and they knew that they were loved. And so then looking at that, that's how you kind of design around what you say yes to, what you say no to in your business, to yourself, to others, all of that.
Yes, period. Like, and I think once you do that and you're not living day by day,
Mm-hmm.
and you're actually living, you see the vision.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I wake up every morning and I'm like, you know what? Thank you, God, for a 7-figure business. I don't have a 7-figure business. I have a 6-figure business, but I'm looking at that. I'm keeping my eyes on the prize as I still enjoy today.
Right. Absolutely.
And
it's kind of heading that way.
Yes. And that's kind of something like, I can't wait until I get there and say, well, now I'm going to do everything I need to do to put the systems in place, put the team in place, do all this so that I don't overwork myself. But I'll wait until then. I'm doing it now.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm living
right. It's knowing your destination, and then you plant each step along the way, and you know where you're going. It's kind of like if you're going to go on a vacation, you don't want to be like, okay, I'll just get in the car and start driving, and wherever I end up, I'll end up. And then you end up lost and confused and wasting all this time and running out of gas. So yeah, you know your destination, and then you're living with intentionality.
Exactly. Intentionality is so important, because I think the Small Business Administration says that most entrepreneurs work about at least 50 to 60 hours a week. So we leave our full-time jobs to work more and actually earn less. And it just doesn't make sense. Entrepreneurship can be so different. This is why, like, in my programs, I'm like, I teach people like, okay, let's get the systems and things in place so that you can still have that impact that you want to make, right? The weight loss, the wellness, the business, whatever you're doing in your business. But you don't have to overwork yourself, or you don't have to overwork your team either to do that. Like, my team full-time is 30 hours a week. Nobody works more than 30 hours a week, period. Mm-hmm. Right. Like I honor that holistically.
Right.
That's
great. And that's great too. You're like living by example. So you're not asking others anything that you're not asking of yourself, and vice versa. So it's respecting yourself, respecting others, and having those clear boundaries. And that's really huge. And it's looking at, what else for you. So someone says, okay, this all sounds great, Dr. Naieema. Like, I am overworked. I'm that person that's like, strung out, and my wellness is definitely not where I want it to be. But what do I do? Like, how do I make a change? What's the next step? what is your guidance for 3 key things that people can do to get themselves out of that kind of hamster wheel pace and into a place of more resonance and who they want to be?
I think the first step is exactly what you just said. They have to acknowledge it. Because there's so many people that I've had the pleasure of communicating with who are stuck. They believe that you must work 8 to 10 hours a day, otherwise you're lazy. So first thing is acknowledging that 10 and 12 hours, etc., is not serving you. That takes a lot. That sounds like an easy step to get to, but it's not. Yeah. Right? So that really journaling about that. Mm-hmm. And this is what I always say to women. This is one thing exercise I give my clients. I want you to journal about this. If you were a bad girl by society's standards, and you didn't care about what anyone thought, you didn't care about showing up for people, what would you want? How would you spend your time? How would you show up? Right? What would you do?
Yeah, it's about permission.
Yes. Give yourself permission to understand that the way that we have decided to work was not in any way created by women.
Yeah. Yeah. So true.
Right. And then once you do that, the second thing is assess. You need to assess what you're doing, what's taking up your time. Mm-hmm. And does it align with what you said you wanted to do in business and why you wanted to go into business? Like, let's say if you said, hey, I want to go into business because I want to impact families with children with autism. How many families are you really impacting when you've been in business for a year and you've only signed on one client? Mm-hmm. Are you truly, is what you're doing truly aligned with what you said you wanted for your business and your life? Mm-hmm. But in order to know that, you got to assess how you're spending your time. How many clients have you signed? How much self-care time do you have? Right. And then now, once you do that assessment, you have to make a plan. So let's say, for example, for me, I was spending a lot of time when I first started building the website. Don't judge me. I mean, like 4 months, it'd be 4 hours a day trying to figure out how to build this website. And then I had developed the erosive gastritis. And I was like, okay, is building this website, has it brought me any clients? Have I made the impact I wanted to make? Do I have any time freedom? No. That goes in the back burner. Right? Yeah. Those are your 3 keys. You got to be aware, you have to assess, and you have to plan.
Great. Yes, those are definitely gems of wisdom. Thank you for sharing. That was so, so important. And I was, thinking too, like, I just, want to acknowledge how great it is that you were in a career. You mentioned as a nurse, right? Mm-hmm. You were a nurse. And then to, have that courage to say, you know what, this is not giving me what I want. This is not fulfilling. I want something else. And then to go after and to pursue it and to then, continue to pivot and adjust as you needed to, and to have that, all of those keys that you mentioned, those are things that you have done. So you're living by example. You're, demonstrating, like, in order to have impact for others, you need to have impact for yourself. You need to walk the walk. And that's definitely what you've done. So amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You know what? I want to be real honest and say it was a process. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur for 5 years before I leaped. I knew that I wanted to be a business coach before I leaped. I became a health coach first because I did what I should do, right? I'm a nurse. I should be a health coach.
Yeah.
Right? Forget the fact that I've always been a great salesperson because I'm great at relationship building. Forget the fact that I've always been very strategic. Right? These are the skills that I was born with. I didn't even want to cultivate them and nurture them for me. And then when I started taking like strength assessments, like Kobe A and all these other strength assessments, it's like, you're a natural strategic salesperson. Like, I'm like, I knew this about myself.
Yeah.
Right? I should do this. I should, right? So anyone who's listening, who's currently in a business where they feel like they started because they should, but they know that they want another type of business, pivot now.
Yes,
Pivot today.
I know. Yeah. Talk about that awareness. That's like a big red flag coming up, because so often when we say, I should do this, there's not resonance there. It's just, it's a feeling of like culturally, socially, whatever pressures dictate that it should be, I want to, and then I get to do this, not like, oh, I have to do this. And so, yeah, good for you for seeing through that should.
Yes. It took a while, but I'm here.
Yeah. Nice. Here. Well, and there are gifts and opportunities in that journey. Some people might say like, oh, why did I have to go through so much to get to this point? And it's like, well, because, that is how you got to that point. Maybe if it weren't for those other things, you wouldn't have gotten to the point that you're at. And looking at the gifts and opportunities that came about, how they were gifts, then that gives you learnings that is so valuable for whatever comes next. So yeah, there's everything's for a reason.
Everything. And, I think about all the hardships and all of the sleepless nights and everything that I've gone through to now be this very successful sales and business strategist. I loved everything about my journey, even the things that hurt, because it has given me perspective that I wouldn't have had prior. It has given me, an ability to empathize more. It has given me the ability to just be a better person. I've gone through things and I've learned the lessons from them. So I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change the fact that I was a nurse. I was not fulfilled in nursing. I was fulfilled maybe the first couple of years. I stayed in it for an additional 16.
Yeah.
I wasn't fulfilled as a health coach because health was never something I was supposed to really do. Yeah. When I finally became a business coach, it was like, oh, this is how it feels to wake up in the morning and feel like this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
I was stuck for a while because how do you tell people that you don't like being a nurse? They tell people that,
Yeah. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah.
So,
and especially there will be people that will question it and say, oh, but you put so much time and effort into working towards becoming a nurse. You just want to throw that away. Like, there's so much.
I remember one of my best friends, but she's one of the close friends. She's an obstetrician, OBGYN. And I remember when I told her, I said, I'm going to be a coach. And she was like, so let me get this straight. You're leaving nursing to become a coach. And I was like, yeah. And then I remember when I made my first 6 figures 9 months later.
And I hear that every 9 months later. 9 months.
Nice. 9 months. And she was like, oh. And then I made my first 6-figure quarter this year, 2021, and the first quarter of 2021. I showed her again. And she was like, oh, okay. I said, what this indicates is that I'm actually helping people. It's not just about, hey, I made this amount of money. No, if I'm bringing this money in, that means I'm bringing clients in, which means I'm getting to impact people in a way that feeds me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is interesting. A lot of times, like, we're pursuing something and it's meeting a certain value. So obviously you have a strong value for helping people. That's probably what drew you to nursing. Caring for others, the compassion, the nurturing, the wanting to take them from where they are to where they want to be, get them through something. So all of that was there. It's just like you were knocking on the wrong door. And then you found the right door to direct all of those gifts and those values. And it's like, okay, that's where things start going into flow.
Yes. And that's just the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. So keep people out of your ears, and really, 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 really do that journaling. If you were a bad girl, how would you spend your time? And we know that wouldn't make you bad, but we just talk about societal, right? How would you do? How would you show up differently in your business? How would you show up differently for yourself or your self-care?
Yeah, those are huge questions. And maybe even taking that a step further of like putting it in writing and, putting it somewhere, creating a vision board about, this is my bad girl self to, again, have that accountability and have that visual cue, that visual reminder in case we forget, we get off track. So speaking of, getting off track, let's say you've made these changes and the wellness increases And then people sometimes start to slip back. They slip back into, old habits, or life gets busy again and they kind of forget what's helped to keep them grounded. So you mentioned accountability being part of it. What else is there to help people, keep this as part of their routine and stay on track once they have shifted?
Intentionality is the key. So for me, I journal every week. And I literally ask myself, did I show up the way I intended to?
Yeah,
what happened?
Question.
What happened? What did I do that really, really aligned with what I said I wanted? And what happened that maybe I didn't? And we're not blaming. It's not like, oh, I should have. No, this is what happened. Kids had a recital this week, or I had, a customer service issue that I didn't expect. So I had to. Perfect. Right. Mm-hmm. So then you get to know, it wasn't that I necessarily just fell back into it. Things happened, or that happened. I realize now that I didn't have a system in place for that. Mm-hmm. Right. Some process improvement is necessary in my business right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one key thing that you mentioned, is as you're reflecting, there's a kind of spirit of blameless discernment to say, okay, this happened and this is why, rather than judgment of like, oh, I let myself do that. So it's kind of, holding that space rather than having, the hammer of a judge saying like, oh, well, this is where you messed up and you messed up over here. And oh, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. So instead, it's like, let's reflect with that openness. It's important to have that open energy of blameless discernment of saying like, this happened and it led to that. Okay, great. What can I learn from that? And how can I navigate differently? Or maybe it is what it is, and that's okay. Giving yourself, again, that permission for, things to go different than expected or planned.
Be human.
Yeah, right? Be human. Exactly.
Like nothing, we do not have all the foresight in the world to know 100% what's going to happen. And no, right? Give yourself grace. Give yourself grace that you would give your best friend who calls you and say, hey, I overworked myself this week when I didn't want to. Give yourself that same grace. You would say, girl, it's okay, right? A new week is coming. We would say that to our friends. But to us, it's like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? Right?
Yeah. That's a great thing to think about is like, what would I tell my best friend? Or, what would a person came in where they had like unconditional, limitless love for me? What would they say to me? So letting yourself hear those words or letting yourself say those words and reflect it back to yourself. So powerful.
Perfect.
Well, thank you, Dr. Naieema, for all of your wisdom and expertise. And I'd love for you to share with the listeners, the offer that you mentioned for them and also where they can find you to
Absolutely. So I have a 1 hour a day Facebook lead generation strategy. I'm going to give you the checklist. It's complimentary. And it's all because I'm truly a believer in self-care. If you have a 1 hour a day strategy that can bring you in consistent leads and not have to kill yourself trying to find leads, why not? So download it. It's totally no cost. You can follow me on IG at Dr. Naieema. So DrNaieema. You can also find me on Facebook, Dr. Naieema Jackson. Dr. Naieema is one word on Facebook because they don't like to put it. Come find me. Send me a DM. I'm all about really building new relationships.
Awesome. Yes, go get that offer. It's an amazing offer. Connect with Dr. Naieema. She is wonderful, as you've seen here. Thank you so much for all that you've shared about being an entrepreneur and your wellness and well-being and how to keep that, how to grow that, how to maintain it. It's been a pleasure.